Hello and welcome. It is episode number 20, the Hilarious Humanitarians Podcast. I am Frances Echeverria, licensed marriage and family therapist.
I am Deanna Silverman, licensed clinical social worker.
And March is Social Worker Month. So we wanted to do something special, and that's why this week we are looking forward to releasing for you a couple of podcasts, each with our own specialty, since we do have different degrees and credentials here. But Social Work Month is focused on those men and women that do an amazing job helping to heal the community. And what we did was we opened it up to our listeners to ask you questions.
This is the most like a recognition I have ever received during Social Work Month. Like I've been in the field for like 10 plus years. Social Work Month like comes and goes and it's just like crickets. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're still here.
You know what credit I will give social workers is so my background, I've only worked with social workers, but I did work as a social worker with my degree only at a foster family agency at one point. And I had a family on my caseload where the mom was a social worker. So I had no idea this month existed until that month. And she gave me a Starbucks cup because I was her social worker. And I was like, yes.
That is so nice.
You social workers have it way more together than us marriage and family therapists.
You know what I think would be also interesting is like to talk about really, really quickly, because I know that there's a lot of confusion. I mean, there's even confusion within me. I have some gripes about the National Association of Social Workers. The NASW is like our kind of like our go-to governing board, if you will. And personally, like they do a ton of great work, but I think that like there could be more clarification and education in like what the difference is in terms of like social workers versus LMFTs versus
psychologists
versus psychiatrists versus even like master's level social work compared to bachelor's level, or I don't know, maybe that's like an entirely different episode, but I don't know.
It is really interesting, actually. And the way I've seen it described is like, I don't know what the words are, but when you take those little circles and you like cross them over, you know what I'm talking about? Like it's like a diagram, because some of them are shared and some of them, there are some things that are distinctly different. Well, all those nifty pie charts or whatever you call them aside, and right now someone's probably yelling at their computer or podcasting device being like, it's this. It is Social Work Month. And so that's what we want to focus on. So Deanna, this is in preparation for us getting famous and being interviewed by like, I don't know, Diane Sawyer someday. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer them.
Oh boy.
And for the purposes of this podcast, we have kept the names out of the questions that are being asked today. Some of them a little more clinical, and then some of them just getting to know Deanna a little more. So what college did you go to, and your majors and your minors and all of the things?
Okay, ready? Here goes. Originally, it was psychology. I went to a community college to save money. And then, actually, let me start the beginning. I went to high school. I didn't like school. I didn't think I was capable of college. I got freaked out. I was like, oh God, I need to do something. So I went to the Fashion Institute in Los Angeles and was a marketing major. I graduated, worked at Hot Topic corporate
yes.
when I was like 19 years old. And that was cool because I met a bunch of bands. And I realized, what the hell am I doing? I'm working like a 9-to-5 cubicle job and I'm 19 and my friends are like having fun at the beach. So I quickly, I lasted maybe 7 months. I quit. I went back to school after a couple months of figuring out what I wanted to do. Was studying psychology at a community college in Orange County, California. Then I transferred to San Diego State as a psychology major. And then I got scared because they required me to do like a foreign language. And my brain does not work with like picking up a new language. At the time I was like 21. I was just kind of over it. I was already struggling with school. So it was already hard enough for me to grapple with the transition back. And I know that sounds like really kind of like suck it up, big baby. But I just was like, forget it. I just want to get my bachelor's. I ended up changing majors just to avoid doing the foreign language requirement. My major ended up being child and family development, which is really weird, actually, now thinking about the fact that there wasn't a foreign language requirement there. But welcome to school. Okay. So I did my bachelor's in child and family development, and I got a certificate in family life education. Then I got my master's degree in social work from USC, and that's it.
Where was your favorite place to go to school? Like just the college experience, which did you like better?
Probably USC. I think maybe just I was like in a good place. I was like in a better place. I took some time off in between bachelor's and master's, and then I was paying my way. I often hear people joke around or say that USC stands for the University of Spoiled Children. I'm like, well, there aren't any spoiled children around here because I paid my way through my master's degree. No one else helped me. And maybe because I was like 28, 29 years old, entering the program, paying for it myself, I was like, you're going to fucking enjoy this shit. You know what I mean? I was like, you're going to soak up this experience and you're going to do all the things. And so I did all of the things. So it was pretty rad.
And here you are.
Yeah,
all right.
Here I am.
You mentioned that you got to meet a lot of musicians, and I've been to your house where you have your wall of musician stuff. So who are some of your favorites?
Oh, okay. It's a personal question. I like it. Okay. The Glitch Mob, M83, and those are my top two. So I'm just going to stay there.
God, it's such a hard question too. I'm impressed that you only narrowed it down to two.
Me too. I never answer questions like succinctly or concisely. So I'm just really proud of myself. So let's just move on because I'm about to explode.
Okay. Favorite color?
Does glitter or...
I knew you were going to say something sparkly.
Does iridescence count?
And iridescence is just something you put on top of another color, right? Or into it?
I don't know. It's like a unicorn color.
You know what?
I'm going with unicorn wait, what the heck? Iridescent glitter color.
Iridescent glitter color. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to working in social work. What populations have you worked with and what are your favorites?
Oh my goodness. Since I have mom brain and I can't remember my personal history, I actually printed out my resume. Would you mind if I went through it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So these are the populations I have worked with since dating back to 2004. Okay. I worked with children with autism, with high risk pregnant or parenting teenagers. I worked for a foster family agency. I worked with Holocaust survivors, oncology, and palliative care patients. I was a social worker in hospice. I was an emergency department lead social worker. I was responsible for like all substance abuse, traumas, deaths, and psychiatric assessments. And then I worked in a inpatient psychiatric hospital with people who were on 5150, like involuntary psychiatric holds for the most part. Some people were voluntary, but most of the time it was involuntary, locked psych hospital. My favorite, the question was, what was my favorite demographic or population?
What do you like working with?
I like crabby, attitude-y teenagers.
And why do you like that? Why do you think so?
And I still do. I actually did have to take a break. The reason why I ended up going to an inpatient psych hospital for adults is because I got really bummed out working with minors, because I feel like oftentimes they are at the mercy. I don't mean to be like super negative, but it was hard because teenagers are already difficult to work with, and, you know, all adults suck in their mind. But once in a while, like, you'd get a teenager who like really wanted help and was seeking help, but their parents were a hot mess and didn't want to hear it from anybody.
So hard.
And so like after enough times of dealing with that, of like the parents thinking my kid is the problem and nothing I'm doing is wrong or needs any improvement, I just got a little burnt out. I needed to walk away. I'll probably be back there at some point. I would love to do some work in with like cyberbullying and work in the schools in some capacity. So yeah, I think teenagers are my favorite. Why? Because they're a challenge and I'm a glutton for punishment and I like challenges and I like showing them that I'm still cool. And that they can like, I don't know, like I just really like crabby, angsty teens. I think that teenagers, like truly our kids are the future. I think that there's something really exciting and amazing about that. And I think that, I don't know. I feel like a lot has changed since I've been a teenager. And then I also think that not much has changed. Like school is difficult. I'm not pointing fingers at like teachers and administration or anything like that, but I just think it's really stressful nowadays, especially mixed in with social media crap. And I just feel like we really need to support our kids, but also not enable them to make them little buttholes.
Don't make your kid a butthole. Yeah, I've worked with teens, and I think the thing that I love is that it's an opportunity. You and I both have talked about our experiences in school, and to be able to tap into that awkwardness that you and I so honestly embrace, I think just makes them realize, oh, you know, like it doesn't minimize their experience. You know what I mean? And and I think the best advice I ever got, because I didn't ever want to work with kids, and then that's exactly what I did, was sometimes teens or kids just need someone to talk to, because literally they are they are in a family that's dysfunctional and they just need someone to talk to. So it's like, as a therapist, you're all excited to do therapy, and then you're like, I'm just sitting here talking to this teen, but that can be the single most important role you have for them. So
also, I won't drag this out too long, but I also really absolutely loved hospice work. I didn't get the opportunity to see my mom die in a dignified way. She was alone when she died. There was a lot of family issues and drama. I think that there's something, it is so beautiful when families come together and recognize the need for hospice care and are able to be there with their loved one in their last days, weeks, months of life, and given the opportunity to say what they need to say before their loved one goes on to the next, level of life, however you want to look at it. That was really powerful for me to be a part of. So I don't know. It's like equal running. I like teens and I like hospice care. So there you go. Hospice care, end of life care for adults, by the way. I am too emotional. I'm not in a place where I could take on hospice care. My heart, every respect, everything goes out to people that provide care to sick terminal children. I wouldn't be able to do it. I would be a mess. Yeah.
Okay, so this question came in. As a host mom for a child with a history of trauma, what advice would you give for parenting or connecting with a child with trauma? I'm guessing maybe to have one that's in foster care or something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first things first, thank you so much for taking on this role. My utmost respect goes out to you. I am so proud of whoever this is that wrote in to say this, because one, you've taken on this huge responsibility, and two, you're reaching out to a total stranger to ask how you can be like the most helpful. Real quick, just in case people don't know, like what trauma is. Trauma can be a lot of things. Trauma can be it's basically like an emotional response to like a really intense event that somebody has gone through. It could be like an isolated single event, like let's say a car crash, or it can be a result from like exposure to like multiple events over time, like exposure to domestic violence, bullying, being separated by a loved one. It could be even exposure to the effects of poverty, like such as homelessness, and obviously like abuse, no matter what kind of abuse it is. So in regards to like how you can best support a child that has a trauma history, I would say, first off, there is an article that I found. It's called, if you just Google parenting a child who has experienced trauma, it's at childwelfare.gov. There are like really, really awesome tips for doing just this. So identifying the trauma triggers is really important. Let's say there's a child that experienced a lot of like yelling and domestic violence. Even like sometimes people can be triggered by just simply like a loud voice. It doesn't even need to be like an aggressive loud voice. It could just be yelling in general. So just to be like mindful of that trigger. Certain images can be very triggering. That's one way, is to identify the triggers so you know like ahead of time. And then also you obviously are probably well aware of how they respond to those triggers. So in terms of like being able to address those in a therapeutic way can be just being patient, allow or help your child learn how to relax. So to develop a routine around practice slow breathing, listen to calming music, say positive things. You can also encourage self-esteem. And by that, I mean, facilitate like positive experiences to increase their resilience, to increase their self-esteem. That could be, you know, doing something new to foster like them developing like a new skill. It could be passing out cans at a homeless shelter together during Christmas time. There's a lot of like power that comes in like helping others can help ourselves. We can also avoid physical punishment. We can listen to our kid. Don't avoid like difficult topics or uncomfortable conversations, and let them know that what they're feeling is normal. But also don't force a child to talk before they're ready, because that is really, really important. As adults, we often think like, you know, in order to get over this, you need to talk about it. But even as like adults, we need to understand that even adults need to do it on their own time, you know? So to do these other things, like being able to identify the triggers, know how to respond to them instead of reacting, not taking the behavior personally, being patient, fostering self-esteem, all of those things actually move our loved ones closer to a place of feeling comfortable to talk about these uncomfortable feelings so that there can be healing around it. And then also looking to get them into like to see like a trauma-informed therapist, social worker. Really important when you're looking for a trauma-informed mental health provider, like there are certain questions you can ask to make sure that they have experience, people with a traumatic history.
Also, too, I know in working with the foster care system before, you know, there are resources available to these children for the healing process. And then, I mean, I know, I'm not sure if it's like this down there in Southern California, but there are really intensive trainings that some foster families, a lot of them actually, they have to go through to understand how to work with a child in trauma. So you get so much great education that's available just being part of the process.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. We know about little Micah and how much we love her. Did you enjoy being pregnant, and do you want another one?
Whoever asked this, are you willing to provide free childcare?
No kidding. Did you like being pregnant? I kind of had a love-hate relationship with it.
I would say it was a love-hate relationship. I am so grateful to be able to have the experience to carry my own child, but because I am who I am and I'm so neurotic and anxious, I had a very hard time like just being present and in the moment, and to quit worrying about everything. Like I don't have a lot of trust in my own body to be able to make a human. Like I have a hard time trusting my body to like wake up in the morning without a headache, just to wake up and feel like okay. So it was really difficult for me to wrap my head around my body is going to be able to like make a human. That was really difficult for me. That's just me being honest. Do I want another one? Yes. But I'm not sure if we're going to have another one. I'm not sure.
I always feel like that's such a weird question to ask people. Like when you say something like, do you want another one? Like that's implying that one's not enough, or maybe they don't know the history of what it took to have one baby or the financial stuff or
yeah.
I don't know. I felt icky reading it. I'll be totally honest.
Yeah. I can understand why people want to ask that, but I'm not sure. Yeah. I almost feel like, am I pressing my luck? Because
I know, right?
She's so awesome.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, oh God, am I going to have some like wild, I don't know. So, okay.
Okay. So
Hope that answered it.
Oh, this one's hard. What do you do when you know a home is bad for a child, but you cannot take them away?
Okay. So it's funny. I get triggered myself. Okay. How do I say this politely? I'll start with, I know many, many, many people who work in child welfare, like child protective services, who are the most incredible people. And I could never do their job ever. One, because the public is so ill-informed on what social workers do in that capacity. And then I also get triggered because the public is so misinformed with what a social worker is and how much we can do and how represented we are in so many different fields. And so it's interesting because when I hear that question, I almost get like, is she assuming that I am a child welfare worker?
It probably, that's my assumption, I'm guessing.
Yeah. But then I also want to be like a little bit more reasonable. Like maybe she knows a child who's in a bad situation and she doesn't know what to do. So I'm going to go with she knows that there's a child out there, because I think that's more applicable to many, many people other than me being irritated because I think everyone thinks social workers just take babies and kids out of homes.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what I encourage people to do. If you have a gut feeling that something is going on in a home, do not feel afraid. Please do not hesitate to call your local child protective service agency and make an anonymous report. There's a reason why it's called suspected child abuse, because this is what we say. We are mandated reporters. Both Francis and I are both mandated reporters. So if we think that something's going on, we're mandated to report. And the reason why it says suspected child abuse report is because there's a suspicion. We're not the investigator. We don't have hard evidence, but there's a suspicion. We have enough, even in like intuitively, or there's enough to go on that there's suspicion. So you can make a report anonymously. And I would say to do that at the very, very least. Do that, because there are a lot of kids out there that are probably praying that somebody makes a report, that doesn't have a voice. So I don't know if that answers the question, but you certainly, what can we do? We can't walk into someone's home and nab their kid, no matter what job or whoever you are. But certainly we can start at making a suspected child abuse report. And you can literally Google Child Protective Services in whatever area you're in, and there's going to be a 24-hour hotline.
So why did you choose social work as a major over some of the other options at the schools you went to? Why social work?
When I started looking into the different programs, because I actually looked into LMFT, I looked into, obviously, I transferred to San Diego State as psychology major. I personally liked how broad social work is. I liked how, especially for like a commitment phobe as myself, I really enjoyed the options. Like there's micro work where you can, work one-on-one with somebody. So there's macro work where we can work in communities. There's meso social work. You can Google all this to figure out what the hell I'm talking about. But social work is represented in like every like literally everything you can possibly think of. Like here's a list of where we can work: hospitals, medical clinics, nursing homes, mental health agencies, substance abuse clinics. We can work for the government. We can work in policy change. We can work in schools, military bases, veteran affairs, correctional facilities, jails, prisons, private practice, you name it. Like, we are everywhere. So I really liked the options. I like the fact that I can do my private practice and therapy. I could be a case manager. I can work to change legislation and work on the Hill and work in policy change. Like, I could do so much. So that's ultimately why I chose social work, because I didn't want to get locked in any kind of like, I don't know, I'm claustrophobic. Don't put me in a box.
You know, one thing that when I was working in the county, that was the first time I had ever like crossed paths with social workers. And so I kind of had this remorse on picking my major. I mean, now I work in a place where it works really well, but social workers really do have more opportunities to work in so many more fields where LMFTs have been kind of not included in that. And so from that perspective, I mean, each major, each area does have its own strengths and its own like areas of focus. But I did really appreciate that about the people with the social work background, is that they could get into so many more job opportunities at the time.
When I had graduated from grad school and I got into hospice, the reason why I did that is because I needed medical experience, because I wanted to get into the ER. And every job I looked at that worked in a hospital only would hire LCSWs. They would not hire LMFTs. And I'm like, why? Because I have a lot of friends who are LMFTs and they're amazing, such as yourself, you know? And there was one LMFT at the hospital, and she would always joke that she was like grandfathered in, so they couldn't ever like hire or fire her, but they weren't going to hire any more. And she just was like, I don't know, maybe it's just your education, where there was, once again, like there's just, we're taught so many different, like, is there a focus in case management? And maybe this is another episode, but I just want to know.
I think some of it, to be perfectly honest, some of it has there's a political flavor to it in terms of those responsible for lobbying for LCSWs to be in specific places. Some of that has changed, but I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap amongst all of the, you know, those particular areas of focus, but some of it has been. Some advocacy groups are a little more, I guess, ahead in terms of navigating that stuff. But
right. All right.
So do you ever think about the bad stuff you've seen or experienced as a social worker when you're not at work?
Before I had my baby, before I got married, I was able to see some really gnarly stuff. And I was a lot better at compartmentalizing things and just storing it in my head somewhere, and then just kind of like putting it in the like recycling bin on the computer. You know what I mean? Like just kind of boop, and it just like going away. But then once I got pregnant and I had my baby, it was so weird. Like all these flashbacks of like every kid that I have witnessed die, like in the ER, like their story and their face like would pop into my head once I had my baby. I think that had a lot to do with also my own like anxiety of having this little human that I love so much, and I don't want anything bad to happen. So naturally, like a lot of memories of like when I saw children get hurt or pass away. God, what was the question?
Do you ever think about the bad stuff you've seen or experienced as a social worker?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. And like you said, though, I mean, there's that compartmentalizing it really, which has to come into.
And, you know, I feel like when I've talked to like nurses and paramedics and, you know, firefighter paramedics and police officers, like we're all the same. We pretty much have to compartmentalize everything. But once in a while, we'll see somebody, we'll be on a case, we'll be in the field, we'll see somebody die who is the age of our child or the age of your mom who you were super close with, or your dad. And like once in a while, you'll see something that you're just not able to compartmentalize, and it'll just hit you, and you can't stop it. And so that's when you need to seek the support of like other coworkers, allow yourself to cry over it, and allow yourself to mourn. I have found that sometimes like there'll be a child that has passed away, and the family will end up like inviting the people that tried to like resuscitate or save their child to the memorial. And sometimes that can offer some support, and other times it's just too raw and too much. So yes, I can't see how it wouldn't affect me, but yeah, so it definitely affects me more that I now have a child.
I think what's important too, you mentioned this, people who are just work in a situation where you could come across this kind of loss, is to have a support network of people who understand it. Because I think like everyday people who might be working a 9-to-5 cubicle job might not get it. And I know that there are a lot of support groups, and we've talked about this in our podcast on burnout and compassion fatigue. I think it's important to address those things so that it doesn't negatively impact our lives.
Yep.
Okay. The next question, as a social worker, were you ever tempted to adopt a child because you had a strong connection and knew you'd be a great mother?
Yeah, this is a kind of a fun question. So when I worked in foster care, I had a foster care girl, and at the time she was like 16 years old, and she would always tell me, Deanna, you have to be a foster mom. Please. Like, there are foster kids out there that would love it if you were their mom. Now, granted, it took her like years to say that. It's kind of a fun story because the first 6 months I worked with her, she didn't say a word. She like, they introduced her at the time as like, this is one of our hardest, kids to work with. She's not going to like you. She doesn't like any adults. And I was like, all right, she's perfect for me. And I would always tell her, it's okay. You don't have to talk to me, but I'm going to break up this one day because you're just going to see that I'm pretty cool. And, you realize that like she was testing me because every adult abandoned her. Every single one let her down. And she didn't know that I was committed. And she didn't know that I wasn't going to let her down. So naturally, she's going to fall back on what she knows, which is, I'm not going to get close to you. Why? So that you can leave and abandon me. So it took me 6 months. 6 months. Try hanging out with somebody for 6 months who is like rude and rolling their eyes and not saying a word to you. They're testing you, And she opened up, and then once she opened up, she wouldn't stop talking. And I'm actually like still like, we're not close, but like we still communicate. Now she's well into her 20s. And at the time, like, God, I was like 24 at the time that I worked with her, and she was 16. And there was a part of me that was like, I wish I was in a place in my life where I could like take her and adopt her, even though she wasn't like, I don't know, maybe person who asked this question is like thinking about a baby, but I actually like wanted to adopt her, and she was 16. So sometimes
I think that's great though. What you point out is that it's always interesting, the people that can make a lifelong kind of impact on somebody. And so maybe you won't be able to adopt a child. Like somebody brought up, if you see a kid in a bad situation, you might not be able to save them, but man, you can impact them in the most amazing of ways, sometimes by just being the obnoxious adult that won't leave them alone.
Yeah, exactly. And just not giving up on them.
Okay. So what is considered emotional abuse to children caught up in divorce? This one's heavy.
Oh, wow. I would say airing out your dirty laundry to your children, trying to get them to pick a side is incredibly abusive as far as I'm concerned. The best thing you can do is let your child be a child and you be the parent. I understand that divorce is extremely difficult. And even if it's warranted, the kid is going through enough. Your child is going through enough. Try your absolute best to just allow them to be a kid and worry about kid things. So even if you're like struggling with money and struggling to pay the bills, as far as I'm concerned, like I just don't think that that's an appropriate discussion to have with children, because they're little, like, they want their mom and their dad to be okay. And oftentimes kids will already look at something like divorce as their fault, even though it always is not their fault. And so they take on a lot of like responsibility and stress that is just simply not meant for them. And so as much as it, even if it is like warranted to call your ex like a big asshole, don't let your kid know that. You know, like
Right.
That's just my personal opinion.
Well, and I think it's more than a personal opinion. I think this goes down to like sound clinical advice, is that your ex could be the biggest, most horrible person in the world. However, if that's that child's parent, they are biologically tied to them in a way. So even if that person is a horrible person, it's still part of who they are. So it's saying part of who they are is wrong. So like you said, keep that out of the conversations. I mean, they can, and this is where like a parental hierarchy goes one way. I think kids should be able to complain to their parents, but parents should not be able to complain to their kids.
I agree completely. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite ways to keep yourself from burning out?
Humor, a lot of joke, a lot of boundaries. By that, I mean, you know, there's so much that's expected of social workers. And when I'm like at work, what I would do is just like, this is my job. I have to prioritize these things above all else. And I work, let's say 9 to 5. And so at the end of the day, like if I know I've done my best and I've done everything I can within like the limitations of my job, I should feel okay about that. There's always going to be work to be done. So an important thing to remember in terms of like trying to not get to a place of burning out is like, if you're going to try to fix everything all the time for everybody and make everybody's problem your own, you're going to burn out. You are going to crash and burn so quickly. And believe me, if you're going to try to do everything, there are going to be people around you that will absolutely allow you to do that. You know what I mean? Like they're going to, you're going to be helpful and take on everybody's job and be helpful to everybody. People are going to take advantage of that. And they're always going to put more on your plate and more on your plate, and like no good deed goes unpunished. So I'm not trying to say like, do the bare minimum and be lazy. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But arrive at your job, do your absolute best, and understand that there's always something more. The work is never, ever, ever done. So just know that and go home, try to relax, do something good for yourself. And, you know, tomorrow is tomorrow.
I was just having this conversation last night with a friend of mine who's an RN, and because she was telling me all these different things. She didn't, you know, so-and-so's on vacation, this and that, all these hours, you know, she's like, I don't know if I'm not seeing my kids enough. I come home and I'm stressed out and tired and blah, blah, blah. This is something I learned working in radio, which is pretty cutthroat and corporate and downsizes. There's always someone behind you that will take your place. And unfortunately, we work in a world where it's downsizing, it's efficiency models, it's production standards. And if you don't advocate for yourself in terms of taking care of yourself, and you're just a good employee, and we've just been conditioned, the system has been conditioned to run those people ragged and then move on to the next one.
Right. It's unapologetic. It's relentless. And if you don't set good boundaries, it will plow right over you with just no regard to your spirit, and it doesn't care. So you have to take care of yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. Just not. In fact, they're probably going to do the opposite and take advantage of your helpfulness and strong work ethic. So I can't be somebody that doesn't have like a strong work ethic. Like that's who I am. I work hard and want to be a team player and improve systems. But I also am less green as I was when I first graduated from school. And I realized like none of this stuff is going to happen overnight. Like I have to just like clock out and go home and enjoy my life, and the work will be there tomorrow. And that's it.
Okay. So what are some of your favorite and least favorite things about being a social worker?
Favorite is just being able to connect with other humans. I genuinely like helping people. I genuinely like knowing about people's lives. I'm a curious person, and I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating getting to know people. I think it is, it's an honor to step into somebody's life and help them towards healing and towards a life that they deserve and is out there for them. So really it's just like being truly like a humanitarian at heart, you know, just doing right by my fellow human being and being present and non-judgmental and having the opportunity to share this life with others. I genuinely, authentically, absolutely love being in this role. What I can do without is the stigma of social work as monsters who take kids from their homes. That is such a tired, boring, ignorant thing to think about when it comes to who social workers are. I also encourage people to get to know their social worker. And I'm not trying to put like social workers on a pedestal, but this is what I'm trying to say here is I pay respect to everybody. I get to know the janitor at work. I get to know the cafeteria worker at work. I get to know the doctor, the nurse. I don't make any assumptions about their life. I don't make any assumptions about their discipline, about their education. I ask questions. I want to get to know who they are. And I had to clarify my role as a social worker at least a couple hundred times since I've become one, because people assume that, and I'm not talking down on people who never went to college or anything like that. But
everybody hears social worker, they think CPS, they think remove kids.
Yeah. I mean, put it to you this way. When I tell people like I have my master's degree, they like fall over backwards. I had no clue that in order to be a social worker, you have to have your master's degree. I'm like, yeah, to be a clinical social worker, you need your master's degree plus 3,200 hours of supervision after your master's degree. And then you have to go on to take your board exams to become licensed. We're in school for almost 8 years, because it's 4 years bachelor's, 2 years master's, and then it takes 2 years to get those 3,200 hours. So if you take no breaks, it will take 8 years to become a clinical social worker. And I cannot tell you, the majority of people that I've come across literally think that like I graduated high school and I just was like, yes, I'm a social worker. And then they expect you to like hug people all day and pass out bus tokens. Like that's literally what you think I do, is like, oh, call the social worker because somebody needs a bag to put their belongings in. Now, don't get me wrong. I will get people bags and I'll give them bus tokens if they genuinely need them. I am not above that. But I certainly am more than just a bus token passer outer. You know what I mean? And like, it's not a joke. Like, of course I pose it as a joke, but I always say like social workers are the Rodney Dangerfield of like the hospital. Like when I was working at the hospital, no one, what's the Rodney Dangerfield line? Like, I get no respect around here. I often feel that social workers are the underdog. And yet everybody's looking for the social worker to like fix something. The second things get like heated or emotional or uncomfortable or complicated, like, can somebody call the social worker? You know, like, well, guys, if you value our presence that much, then let us get a seat at the table and treat us like a part of the team. And you know what? I got to say that like, I feel good because I feel good when I hear social workers tell me, okay, for example, my doctor a couple of years ago is from the East Coast, and she was like, oh my God, in the hospitals that I worked in the East Coast, the social workers were treated like the next messiah. Like they were highly respected. They were like on equal playing fields as like the doctor. Like the doctor literally could not do their job like holistically, like discharge and follow up and all those resources without the social worker. They were truly the doctor's wingman. I'm like, God, that must have been nice, because I'm literally fighting for a place to sit and do my work. I've got all this responsibility and all this like other people's trauma that I have to deal with, and all this emotion and really, really difficult stuff. And in the meanwhile, I'm being treated like some Milton on Office Space, being told to go to the basement. Everyone's stealing my red stapler, you know? So that would probably be the worst part. It's like, in the meanwhile, while social workers have $100,000 in school debt and that we're paying on for the rest of our lives, to be literally like the person who is doing some really treacherous, traumatic work, to then be disrespected by a lot of the disciplines we work amongst, or like just completely dismissed or undervalued, is appalling to me. So stop being dicks, guys. Talk to each other. Get to know one another.
And I was like, you know what I do? I write my name all over my goddamn stapler.
I bring my own stapler. I really do.
Okay, so social work, though, as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of opportunities to work in a lot of government systems, managed healthcare, things like that. But there's also opportunities to get into kind of an entrepreneurship type deal, which you've shown. So talk about that.
The Instagram thing is a really good example, actually. I've had hundreds of social workers reach out to me to say, like, thank you so much for doing this Instagram thing and showing that like social workers are so much more than like we have a sense of humor. I'm like, yeah, we have like the best sense of humor, seriously, to deal with the shit that we see. Like, I actually like love this story. Like, every time I play cards like I used to play cards against humanity a lot with the staff at the hospital that I used to work at. And every time we played it, the social workers, and it wasn't just me, it was like other social workers, would always win. Like, we had the nastiest, darkest, so crazy sense of humor, you know? We're so twisted, because that's how we have to deal with it, because we do have crazy sense of humor, and I love it. That goes back to the whole Instagram thing of people being like, thanks for showing that we've got a sense of humor and we're so much more than what people assume we are. Also, you know, I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were interviewing journalists, asking, why do we hear in the media like very little about the social worker when we are really like experts in our field, especially when it comes to like mental health, or like really like we're experts in so many fields. Like, why are we so underrepresented or misrepresented in the media, specifically like newspaper articles about something? Like, oftentimes you'll see a lot of presence with like psychologists and psychiatrists, and the journalist was saying, like, we don't hear a lot from social workers like reaching out to us to at least say, you know, I didn't like the frame that this article was written, I want to give you some more information, or I want to enlighten you on something. So she was encouraging social workers to reach out to the media, to give an interview and make a connection with a journalist. And I thought that was amazing. And I thought that was really, really cool of her to say. And so I hope there's social workers that are listening to this, because I've been doing what she actually encouraged social workers to do, which is reach out to media and see if you can make those connections and network. That'll also help you entrepreneurially, like your business, because it gets your name out there. You can write articles. You can, once again, like, you know, network with the media. You can start an Instagram account like the one I started, you know. That all helps with business development, branching out on your own. You know, I got to say, I don't want to dismiss this huge kind of caveat, which is, the host of that podcast show, he's a social worker himself, the one that was interviewing the journalist. And he was like, you know, I feel for social workers though. Like, we have this like very, very, very stressful, thankless job. And so when we're done with work, a lot of us check the hell out. You know, we just check out. We don't want to think about work. We just cannot take in any more. And so that might be why we're less proactive in like contacting media to be like, hey, you got this wrong, or I'd like to do an interview, to like give the social workers take that as there's a lot of need out there. And I think that that should be like an exciting opportunity for social workers of the world to be like, hey, I realize that I'm tired and I realize I need a break, but maybe this is something I should look into, whether it's just like maybe once a month or once every couple months, you reach out to somebody to develop those relationships, to get our name, our practice out there in a different light, you know?
You could tie it into not self-promotion, but it's a little bit of advocacy work on your own behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is important. And that could be even like giving you an example, and you won't get paid for this, but, you know, offering to give a speech somewhere, offering to, like, my kids always have different parents come in and talk about their jobs, to come in and talk to a classroom, like, and give like a little example to a bunch of kids. Here's how you talk about feelings. Here's identifying feelings, you know, using some of your skill set to pass on the information you've paid so much to learn at school.
Right.
Okay. So our next question. I have a lot of negativity surrounding me in the workplace. I plan on quitting as soon as I can find a new job. What can I do in the meantime to maintain positivity and mindfulness in the face of such negative attitudes from all levels of management downward?
Oh, God, I feel you on a very deep level, my friend, whoever wrote this. I have dealt with this way too many times to count. It's incredibly disheartening and frustrating. So this is what I would say to somebody that's working in a place that has just a bunch of negative people around them all the time. It sounds like this person is already looking for other work. I applaud you. I always say that the best time to look for another job is when you already have one, even if you're not happy with it. Keep looking, right? But in the meanwhile, you still have to go to work. So here are just like some personal tips that I've done. One is distancing yourself as much as possible, but not alienating yourself, because you still are at work. So you need to be able to work amongst the team, even with a bunch of negative people and toxic people around. But what I mean by distancing yourself is like, come to work, focus on your job. When you take breaks, like this is what I used to do, is when I would take lunch breaks, I would, instead of like sitting in the little like kitchen area, I would take walks. And that way, like, I wasn't sitting in my office where people could see that I'm just sitting by myself, you know, and like giving them something to talk about. I would go on walks. So even if they had something to talk about, it's like, well, maybe I'm trying to lose some weight. Who knows? Also, like when I felt that people were trying to pull me into the negativity, like the gossiping stuff, I would just make an excuse as to like why I needed to step away. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I need to take this call, or there's something important came up, or whatever. Because you do have to balance out, like I've tried to take the direct approach. I don't really want to talk about that, you guys. Like,
yeah, sometimes you really do have to just dodge it.
Yeah. And like, I hate to say it, but like when you're direct, which is like my style, I like shutting people down to be like, I don't really want to be negative, guys. Can we talk about something like this? I have found that it makes the negativity worse. Like all of a sudden now they're like talking shit about me because they feel some kind of way because you were direct with them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So
they take that off sometimes as like aggressive, or like you're just not playing by whatever social rules.
Right, exactly. And so it sucks because you're just like, can you be an adult and shut up? But they can't. And oftentimes we find that we're working with a bunch of like grown children. So use that with caution, you know. I don't want somebody being like, yeah, I'm going to put my foot down and tell them how it is, because I'm just telling you, like in my experience, sometimes it does get worse. With that said, I'm not trying to get everyone to sue people or start lawsuits, but if there's like egregious, like really nasty behavior, I just tell people to document everything. If you're going to HR, like on what day did this, like I'm just like a documenter of things. If something is really out of control and it's not being properly addressed by management or administration, like write down the day it happened, what happened, who was around, who said it, and just file that away in like your personal records if for some reason you need to use it later on. Now, with that said, don't be this like, I want to tread lightly on that because I don't want people thinking like, yeah, I'll just sue them or I'll go to HR and just because you really want to resolve things professionally and just move on, because going that route is not ideal, obviously, and it takes a lot of time and emotional havoc. So distance yourself, focus on you, focus on your work, try to come up with reasons why you shouldn't be around, you not to be around these people. And if there is like even just one other positive person at work, try to hang out around with them some more, Lastly, like kind of let them, this sounds weird, but like let them act out. So what I mean by that is like, don't completely block out the toxic person because you still need to work with them and you don't want to be seen as being subordinate or like unwilling to work with other people. Just find where you're comfortable, like cooperating with them on some level, given your mutual employment, because they're not like a toxic friend that you can just stop answering the phone and dismiss them entirely. Like you do have to work with them. So even if their ideas and the stuff they say is completely ridiculous and they suck and their input is asinine, like just don't interrupt them when they talk. Just let them get it off their chest and smile, nod, go on with your life, Try to make as few waves as possible. You're there to do a job, do the job well, don't engage in drama, set an example. Try not to take this personally because the second you leave that job, which I'm hoping for this person is soon, the next person that comes in is going to catch the wrath of this miserable person. Like they're going to be miserable forever.
Yeah, it's not going to change with you.
Right. It's not going to change. So it's very, very difficult from somebody who's been in this situation way too many times to count. It's very difficult not to take it personally, but try your best to just focus on exciting, positive stuff and just realize that this person is a miserable troll and they're always going to be that way.
Okay, Deanna, last question of our podcast is, why do you feel like there is such a high burnout rate for social workers?
Well, I just think because we're in this job for a reason, because we are sensitive souls. Being like empaths, I'm a self-proclaimed empath, being sensitive, it's a calling. This isn't just like a job that you find in the newspaper that you're like, yeah, this will do. Like you're taking on people's darkest hours, their most traumatic experiences. How could this not be kind of like the perfect blend or the perfect storm to come of like burning out if you don't have the right support to deal with everything that we see and hear on a daily basis? A lot of times it can come from like the top where like administration or management isn't that supportive, or they're expecting you to do your job, but they're not equipping you with the right resources to do your job. Or it could just be the greater system, like your management is totally on board and gets how we're so restricted and limited. But in the same like breath, we're also expected to like fix everything and make it right. Like I always joke about like our wand, the social work wand. Like people just expect us to like bop people on the head and be like, okay, you're fixed. And you're
iridescent colored?
Yes, of course it is, And when you bop them on the head, glitter explodes and then everybody's fine, Yeah, so this imaginary wand, just a heads up, all the social workers' wands are broken in half. I mean, and that's not because of our doing. It's because we work in a system that has a really hard time validating or supporting the reasons why we need to be here, which is human. As long as humans exist, social workers are going to be employed because humans are complex, very hurt, pained people. And we have so much stress that we're dealing with on a constant on a pretty constant basis. So there it goes. Like, how can we not feel burnt out at times? I read somewhere like a long, long time ago that like generally social workers need to take a break. Like sometimes we'll walk away from the career kind of completely and we'll take some time off. I'm still doing social work stuff, but like now I'm self-employed, I'm doing more creative stuff. And I felt like I kind of hit my point where it's like I needed to walk away. I was seeing a little too much dark stuff all the time and it was feeling like a drag. So I don't know. You got to do what feels right for you. Be confident that you're making the right decision. And if you're going to stay in it, know that you need to seek out support, whatever that is. But you absolutely do need support, whether that's from management, from your coworkers, and practice self-care. Self-care. I feel like if you were to take all of our podcasts and put them together, it would be like highlights: self-care, boundaries. Yes. Boundaries like a mother F. Yeah.
All right. So that concludes our special social work month edition of the show. We're doing something special this week in getting both sides of your hosts here for the Hilarious Humanitarians podcast. So follow us online. You are who on Instagram?
Hilarious Humanitarian on Instagram, Humanitarians Podcast on Instagram. You can email us your thoughts, concerns, questions to humanitarianspodcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe on iTunes. Look us up anywhere like podcasts are aired and give us 5-star reviews. Please, if you love us, that keeps the show going. So subscribe, tell all your friends to subscribe, grab your dad's phone and just subscribe and download every episode. Have no shame about that at all.
And we are going to come back with the Ask the LMFT version where I'm going to be answering some questions. I'm Shut Up Skippy, by the way, on social media. And also, please know this, we got a ton of questions, and a lot of them are so complex that they deserve entire podcasts. So we are going to be holding on to some of this stuff and using it for future podcasts too. But we'll come back with the next one with the Ask the LMFT version. That does it. Bye.
Bye, guys.